Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. I seek refuge in Allah from misleading and being misled, from betraying and being betrayed into ignorance by others. I ask Allah to guide my heart and to guide my tongue. I declare belief in Allah, the beneficent, the merciful. All praise be to Allah, who has created man and has not left him without guidance, the book of Allah, and the example of our beloved messenger of Allah, Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who lived 1400 years ago, to whom the Quran was revealed. We ask that Allah confer upon us a knowledge that is useful, a heart that is enlightened, a tongue which is truthful, an intellect that is unerring, a confidence that is pleasing to Allah. May Allah confer upon us success in this life and in the hereafter, and may He join us in the company of the righteous. We begin in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. How's everybody doing this morning? Give me something, show me you're awake. If you can turn on your cameras, do that so I can see your faces. There's our beautiful sister Roohe and sister Lamis and sister Sarah. Can I get a few more? Let's see if we can get a few more cameras. That would make me very happy. Abu Naeem, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Bushra. Yes, I'm trying to get like some sunshine internally, so I'm externally wearing the color of it. I'm trying to wake up with the sun. Here we go. Sister Patricia, awesome. I love this cat. This is so amazing. All right. There you are. There's our beautiful Sister Patricia. Do we have any more cameras happening right now? I love seeing faces because I get to connect. And then if I ever run into you, I've run into people in the airport of Egypt, in the airports all over the world. And it's like, I've seen you on Zoom or on, subhanAllah, how small our world has become, right? So when I see your faces and I see you in person, I can actually spot you out, right? Our beloved sister Yasmin, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right. So the one thing I didn't say yesterday that I want to say is I like collect these little notebooks. Everybody has their thing, right? But I go back years later and I review some of my notes from these sessions and they are just gems. So I know I'm old school. I like to write with a pen, but when you see something or hear something that someone shares in the retreat, try to write it down so you can go back and actually see it and it's tangible. And then, of course, I'm the big fan of like, drop it in the comments, drop the quote in the comments, because half of us are like hustling, trying to remember what was the exact word she used or he used. And it's just one of those moments that it'll come out and it'll be so magical and it'll touch the soul and then it's gone and we want it written down somewhere. So take notes, share it with us. Tell us what, stood out to you, what changed you, what impacted you, what influenced you, what inspired you. And all of that is inspirational to us, right? I think, Roohe, you would agree. When somebody is reflecting on what we're saying, we're realizing, okay, this is, we can go down this path and we're connecting with the souls that are in the room, right? In the Zoom room. So I love that. I recommend it to everybody. So without any delay, I want to introduce our distinguished speaker. We're very excited to have you here. Very important topic today that you're discussing with us as we enter Ramadan. So our beautiful sister, Roohe Ahmed, is a registered dietitian with over 15 years of experience working for a healthcare organization as well as a nutrition instructor at the college level. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA, and a master's degree in public health, specializing in nutrition from Loma Linda University. Ms. Ahmed specializes in weight management for adults and children and chronic diseases linked to nutrition, and is also a certified personal fitness trainer. She's active in the Muslim community, serving on various boards and committees, and has been leading a women's study circle for more than 10 years, mashallah, Allahu Akbar. Ms. Ahmed is passionate about all aspects of wellness and just as passionate about a good cup of tea. I love that. And your energy. Saying wa alaikum salam, I am handing you the mic.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here as part of this gathering and really excited to kick off this Ramadan retreat on starting with nutrition, which is definitely an area that many people think about when we are, of course, gearing up for Ramadan, but sometimes not in the way that we want to, right? It might more likely be in the realm of, okay, what prep are we doing in terms of how many samosas am I wrapping up? How many other items am I stashing in my pantry? So, if is it okay for me to share a screen? Okay, perfect. So let me just share a screen. So I have a little presentation that I am going to be going over, and inshallah, I think at the end we're going to have time for Q&A. Is that correct, Sister Maha? I believe so.
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
Inshallah.
perfect.
Inshallah.
Perfect. So, Jazakallah khair again, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, for having me here to present. And as you mentioned, I can't believe 15 years have already gone by that I've been practicing nutrition. And one of my niches actually is weight management. And I've seen it all, I've heard it all. And it's so interesting because whenever I hear from my patients, I always come back to how there's so much hikmah, so much wisdom in our prophetic guidance, and how so many principles that are in our sunnah is exactly what we need to follow for optimal health. And this retreat I listened in last night is going to mashallah so powerful regarding the different practices of our dear beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, on not only what to eat, but how to eat. And last night, what really stood out when Sheikh Hisham was talking about the sunnah of hunger, of being hungry. I think a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to feel that way. Many people actually don't know what that feels like. I have quite a bit of patients that actually get uncomfortable. And we're so blessed that we don't even have to feel that way for too long. We know that at the end of our fast, we have a spread waiting for us. So that's definitely a blessing. And as I know we're going to be going through this weekend, we're going to be learning so much about the aspects of gluttony and the harms and what we can do to hopefully, inshallah, shift our mindset. And from there to shift our practices and habits to one that is more pleasing to Allah. So some of the work, as I mentioned, I do specialize in weight management, but I'm also really a big advocate of just overall wellness and especially wellness in women. Um, and I actually work with an organization called the Rahma Foundation that some of you may have heard about. It's an educational organization that's committed to designing educational programs that address topics that are unique to Muslim women. And I do have series of lectures actually on YouTube through the Rahma Foundation if anyone's interested later on, if you want more information. And I'm actually been working with the organization, inshallah, hopefully later this year, make dua that we have a grand women's wellness conference that focuses not only on spiritual wellness, financial wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness. So that's some of the exciting things that hopefully we have, inshallah, coming up ahead. And I'm also a nerd on gut health and hormones. These are two areas that I'm also very passionate about. And I know Dr. Lumis, she's here. She's going to be speaking on hormones, inshallah, gut, sugar later on in her presentation, which is going to be really exciting. So in any case, let's inshallah launch in to the presentation here. And as I mentioned, and as Sister Maha mentioned, I am a registered dietitian, and registered dietitians, we actually specialize in medical nutrition therapy. So we're the only ones that can really prescribe, a therapeutic plan that's individualized based on someone's chronic conditions or health conditions that they may be having. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that unfortunately, now in this realm of social media, we see so many people out there that are prescribing nutrition advice with good intentions, but inshallah, sometimes it doesn't necessarily work for what an individual needs. So just kind of take that into consideration. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about are definitely generalized, but if you have a certain chronic condition or health concern that you have, please, at the end of the day, discuss with your health practitioner and listen to the advice that they have. And that's important to kind of keep in mind, especially when we are online, when we are, going through different feeds and blogs and information that's just out there, just to be careful with what we are going to be taking in and doing for ourselves. All right. Let's get this going here. So I'm going to be talking about is Islam and the importance of our health. And we're so blessed that taking care of ourselves, taking care of our body, physically and mentally, is part of our deen. And I notice this a lot when I am, counseling my patients that are non-Muslim, that sometimes they don't have that aspect, that importance, that provides them with that motivation to make permanent changes. So really, alhamdulillah, blessed to have this just mixed into our deen. I'm going to be focusing on excess weight and the health issues that arise as a result, how diets don't work, and then really get into weight management and good health strategies in light of the Sunnah. Now, Ramadan is really an amazing time because this is a time that we can do a reset. We are not eating throughout the day. We're able to kind of rein in our nafs and control those desires during the day. How can we take these principles, take these practices that we are incorporating during the month and take them into the rest of the year? So I'm going to be talking about that, inshallah, as well. So as I mentioned, and as we're going to be talking about this whole weekend, nutrition, wellness definitely pops up so many places in the Quran and in the Hadith. And I'm just highlighting just a couple of ayahs that come to mind. I think there's many more. But eat and drink, but avoid excess. And that is such a powerful ayah because it's incorporating a concept that we see happening more and more around us. This concept of just excess consumption of media, excess consumption of information, and of course, excess consumption of food and beverage. And the amount of calories that we see in a singular food item is just appalling sometimes. If we think back to our ancestors, if we think back to prophetic times, our ancestors were not eating that much and they were not eating that frequently. They were having wholesome foods. And that's what the next ayah is. People eat what is good and lawful from the earth that is pure, right? And nowadays, again, we'll see items that literally chock full of calories. The standard, caloric recommendation on average is about 2,000 calories a day, give or take, for men and women. This is not across the board, but just a generalization. And we'll see literally singular food items that have double, triple that amount of calories that can be easily consumed. So in this era of just seeing this excess, right, and the addictive quality, that's another concept that is definitely being researched, how certain foods might actually have an addictive effect in the body. This rise and fall of dopamine and other neurotransmitters that kind of give this high almost, and withdrawal when people are not having certain foods, not having certain drink. So it's definitely a precarious situation that we've been in for a while, as we see food portions also increase dramatically. And then this starts to become the norm. We start to feel like, well, this is how much I should be eating, when this is not the case. And then in Ramadan, actually, when we start fasting, it is difficult in the beginning, right? We are weaning ourselves from that caffeine that we might be so used to in the morning, right? We might be, weaning ourselves from this amount of foods that we're consuming. So yes, we are feeling tired. Yes, we are feeling fatigued. And it's actually a good idea. I know we're just literally mere days away from the blessed month, but if we can start now by decreasing some of that consumption, by weaning back from some of the caffeine, maybe taking out, a cup or two that we have during the day, but starting some of these practices as we gear up for the month ahead. Another ayah that I wanted to highlight here is, you who believe, eat the good things we have provided for you and be grateful to God if it is Him that you worship. So again, this concept of gratitude, concept of mindfulness, concept of eating good things, right? Not just good in taste, of course, that's important, but also food that is nourishing, nutrient dense for our bodies. I think we've all heard the saying that you are what you eat, right? So the things that we're eating literally are breaking down in our body to become a part of who we are. And whenever I teach children, I always give this example. I'm like, what do you guys want to be? Do you guys want to be that Cheeto? Do you want to be that, Oreo cookie? So, and sometimes they're like, yeah. But usually adults, we realize that no, in fact, all this food can be therapeutic, but it can also be harmful in our bodies. Our beloved prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, has said so many things. There's so many things in these, and I know Sheikh Hisham and our blessed guests this weekend are going to be highlighting so many of the things of how important health and well-being is. How literally we are going to be, asked about how we treated our body, what we put into our body. Verily, your body has a right over you. It is an amana. And knowing what we do now in this day and age of how food does affect us, we have a responsibility of what we are putting in. Ask Allah for forgiveness and health, for after being granted certainty, one is given nothing better than health. How many of us feel that way when we're not feeling well? That we realize, oh wow, I didn't know how horrible it feels having this headache, right? Having this stomach ache. We don't appreciate health unless we are not in a good state of health. So not having that opportunity, right? Trying our best to take care of ourselves so that inshallah we are feeling at our optimal. Now this next hadith, I think we've heard so many times, and and I know Sheikh Hisham actually mentioned it last night as well. And I want to highlight the beginning part of this hadith, that no human being has ever filled a container worse than his own stomach. So this concept of, that our stomach, right? What are we filling it with? And what happens when we fill too much, right? The son of Adam needs no more than a few morsels of food to keep up his strength. Doing so, he should consider that a third of the stomach is for food, a third for drink, and a third for breathing. But as we learned last night, as Sheikh Hisham mentioned, does anyone recall that the other third, right? It says third for breathing. What is that also incorporated with? Pop quiz time. Does anyone recall? I'm going to try to look if I can see in the chat if anyone recalls. Exactly, remembrance of Allah. I think that was just so profound and so beautiful. That just intertwined with the breathing is that remembrance of Allah. But what I want to highlight is the part that a lot of times we forget, that son of Adam, needs no more than a few morsels. So again, this concept of not eating so much, eating less, right? Keeping it moderate. And I think this concept of moderate has so many different definitions, right? Depending on who's speaking on it. So we'll be speaking upon that further. So the fact that we have so much in our deen emphasizing health, right? Emphasizing also the concept of restraint. And I see this a lot with my patients, is that it's hard to have that, quote unquote, willpower, right? That motivation, right? To pull ourselves back, to be like, no, I'm not going to have that second or third, right? But we have that incorporated in our deen, right? The concept of restraint of our nafs, right? Reining in our nafs, training our nafs, right? And this beautiful, blessed month of Ramadan is providing us with that training to help us rein in. So why is excess consumption, gluttony, how does that play out in health effects in our body? So there actually, unfortunately, are quite a bit of health issues linked to being overweight and obese. And we are seeing, again, this explosion of obesity in our own country and as well as in our home countries. And I'm not sure if anyone has seen, there's some charts that the Centers for Disease Control puts out every few years about the amount of people categorized as overweight and obese and how that number is just expanding. Literally, you'll see like the colors in the states just change each time that they put out those reports. So what are some of the different health problems, unfortunately, linked with being overweight? Prediabetes and diabetes. So this effect on our blood sugars. And we are definitely seeing an explosion of this. This is like a little silent epidemic of prediabetes, diabetes, high blood pressure as well. And we see this a lot, unfortunately, in our Muslim communities, because we also have a genetic predisposition to high blood sugars, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Especially in the South Asian population, we see high cholesterol as being very a major issue, and how it plays out into increased risk of heart disease and stroke. Lipid problems, cholesterol issues. There are even certain cancers that we see that are linked with excess weight. Joint and back problems. What's really interesting about this is for every pound of weight that we lose, we alleviate 4 pounds of stress off our joints. So let's suppose someone lost 10 pounds, that's all of a sudden 40 pounds of pressure, stress coming off their joints. So that's definitely, a major thing that we see. Breathing and sleep problems, sleep apnea, and even psychosocial issues we see could be connected with excess weight, anxiety, depression, for instance. Now, this next slide just makes me laugh a little. I saw this online a little while back. But as I was touching upon earlier, when we go on social media, when we go online, there's so much information out there on how to lose weight quick, right? How to, drop that 20 pounds, get the 6-pack of abs, and all this information. And a lot of it sounds really good. There are people who it works for them. And we have to keep in mind that a lot of times what works for one person may not work for us. And we really are moving in this realm of more individualized, personalized nutrition, where we will have clients come to us and we will be running blood tests, stool tests, hair sample tests, urine tests to see, what if they have any genetic mutations, if they have any deficiencies, if there are any composition of their gut microbiome that might affect how they're processing certain food. So we're not completely there yet, but we're definitely moving in that direction. But until we get there, I always tell people, I'm like, listen to your body. What is your body telling you? If there's certain foods that you eat and you feel sick, you're feeling bloated, you're feeling a headache, that's not maybe working for you right now. So maybe abstain for that right now. But let me try to see if I can read this. I have her. So yes, I saw this online. Simple way to lose weight: eat 5 small meals per day, and run. Also eat only breakfast and dinner, and walk. Also eat lots of protein and lift, and don't do any cardio. It's bad for your joints. Also, don't eat too much protein, and make sure you're sleeping a lot, but don't be sedentary, but don't be too active. It's bad for blood pressure. Make sure you replace all your lost salt, but never eat too much sodium. It's easy. Just eat vegetables. Don't eat potatoes though, or corn. Fruit is obviously good for you, and also it's all sugar. It's all sugar and is bad for you. Sugar, I forgot to mention, is a vital source of quick burning carbs that your brain needs to survive, and you should avoid it at all costs. Protein is hurting your kidneys. Make sure you eat a lot of it. Drink water. Never starve yourself. Unless you're calling it intermittent fasting, then it's okay to starve yourself a little bit. Don't overhydrate. Being vegan is obviously the healthiest lifestyle. And also, no, it's not. Fish is obviously super good for you, and it's full of mercury and killing you. Get some sun every day for vitamin D and skin cancer. So simple, right? It's so confusing out there when we are trying to get this information. It's like, what do I do? How do I navigate this? So that's where, a registered dietitian, our naturopathic doctors, our other physicians and practitioners come into play. So we keep in mind that everyone's different. But at the end of the day, what always I keep coming back to, because I have, patients going through and trying all sorts of bad diets, right? People that are on like diets where they're just eating lots of meats and lots of fats, or they're just eating purely vegan, plant-based, and the cabbage soup diet, all sorts of things. Unfortunately, my friends, fad diets don't work in the long term. They really don't. They work in the interim. We get all excited, all motivated. We drop that weight because at the end of the day, what's happening is a person is actually decreasing their calories. So, of course, whenever we decrease our calories, we are going to lose weight. And ideally in Ramadan, that should be what's happening. I'm not going to ask by a show of hands how many people lose weight. I'm not going to ask. But unfortunately, I'm not looking. But unfortunately, a lot of times people, they gain weight. And because we also think of Ramadan as a month of feasting, right? That's when all the delicacies come out. As I was mentioning earlier on, I think a lot of times people are already gearing up. Like, I gotta get my padis, ready for the month. For us as Pakistanis, I gotta get my pantry stashed, and we get into this mode of feasting, right? And we think, oh my gosh, I didn't eat all day, so I have to load up at night, not realizing that we're still eating 3 meals, by the way, right? And sometimes those meals are, again, excessive amount of calories. So it backfires. But if we truly follow the prophetic principles of fasting, which I'm going to be talking about, which I'm going to be outlining, then inshallah, we will be able to lose that weight that we want to lose and feel better. So what we're told is just eat less and move more. And it makes people almost feel bad when they can't lose that weight, right? When they can't shift their health status to the way that they want, because it's almost like we're putting it completely in our hands and in our control. And unfortunately, it's not. There's a lot of other factors that play a role. I know Dr. Lamis, Dr. Mazen later on will be talking about some of those factors, but hormones, right? Hormones can, really wreak havoc on our body and make it maybe difficult to lose weight, especially for women as they're entering into perimenopause and menopause, right? And we're seeing a drop of estrogen and a shifting of even where the weight goes. That makes it challenging. The gut microbiome, this is a huge, huge area of research. We have trillions of microbes that reside in us and on us. And we're learning so much about the role that they play in our overall health and well-being. Stress, that's another huge aspect that affects our health and well-being. And I know Dr. Lamis and Dr. Mazen will be touching a little bit upon that later on as well. That's a huge area because a lot of times when people are stressed, unfortunately, a way of dealing and coping with that stress sometimes is through food. And a lot of times it's not through healthy food. I don't think anyone's ever stressed out thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to eat broccoli. It's going to make me feel better, right? No, if anyone feels like that, let me know. It's very rare, right? It's usually, I got to have the chips, I got to have the cookies, I got to have the ice cream. And then we feel better for how long, right? Then that stress is still there. So this concept of stress management, right? And excessive amount of stress does affect our neurochemistry, does affect our neurotransmitters, right? And that's another issue as well. And good foods can help hopefully to shift the balance of that. And also sleep. That's another huge area that when we're not getting enough appropriate, refreshing sleep, that does affect inflammation levels in our body. It does make weight loss and just health in general a little bit more difficult. Now, I know during this month of Ramadan, we are sleep deprived, but it's beautiful in our deen that we have the concept of barakah in our time. So even though we might not be sleeping that much, inshallah, it has immense barakah that we are feeling refreshed, we are feeling okay. So again, this whole concept that we're told, it's so simple, but it's not the whole story. And I don't want us to beat ourselves up that we're trying these things and it's not working. That we need to be patient in the process. So enter Ramadan, enter our prophetic guidance. So this is a time of year, again, that we can really use up as an opportunity, not only for a spiritual reset, for sure. And as Sheikh Hisham was talking about, last night in a very powerful session, really looking at this as a reset in our mindset, reset in our physical and mental health as well. How are we viewing the principles of this month? How are we incorporating this beautiful prophetic guidance that our Prophet, he really lived how can we incorporate that into our life and make the transitions and shifts that we want to achieve the goals that we want? So I'm going to talk about some strategies for weight management and really touch upon what we also have in our tradition, how that keeps coming on back in as really being a powerful way of change. So I'm not going to be touching too much just in consideration of time on the aspect of physical activity, how that is really important, right? And especially natural physical activity doesn't necessarily mean that we're, at the gym, but even just walking, right? How many of you here during Ramadan try to get in some sort of movement? And I know a lot of times I get this question a lot. Well, when should I exercise? Should I do it before suhoor? Should I do it right before iftar? Should I do it after iftar? I always tell people, I'm like, do it when you feel you can get it into your schedule. Even if it's 10 minutes, 10-minute walking outside, right? An exercise video, a yoga, tai chi, just simple stretches. But it's very important to have that movement incorporated. So we see this just even in weight management as well, this concept of, getting in more steps. And I think a lot of us have heard about, 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps is about roughly 45 minutes, 5 miles, give or take. But we're seeing more and more in the literature of even just 7,500 steps, aiming for that. That's actually where we see a difference, where we see a decreased risk of different chronic conditions. So instead of 10,000, we can even aim for 7,500. If you feel even that's daunting, whatever it is that you can do. But this concept of just doing movement, and obviously in our sunnah, we see this, right? This has actually been one of the prophetic guidances, right, of moving, managing our stress. And there's different ways of managing our stress. But this one thing I want to highlight is the concept of social connection. And I love how in this month, we have this concept of communal gatherings, right? Communal breaking of the fast, where it's suggested to break another person's fast, right? Communal gatherings of prayer. And so that we have this built into our deen. It's just so beautiful because so many people, unfortunately, are suffering. They're suffering from social isolation. 3 years ago at this time, right? What were we going through with the beginning of the pandemic? Not being able to go to our massages and how that felt, right? But at that time, even though we weren't able to do that, there was so much stuff online. I felt like there was still that connection, but there's something powerful about that face-to-face, connection. So really trying our best to incorporate that. Getting enough quality sleep, gut health. I'm going to be touching upon that a little bit later on. That's a whole beast of a subject in and of itself, and how much we're learning more about that. Eating less processed, wholesome foods, right? From last night's session with Sheikh Hisham, he mentioned about the bread that our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, used to eat. The barley bread. It wasn't like this fine ground breads that we have now, but like a coarse bread. And it made me think about this, that how so much of our food nowadays is so ultra processed, right? When we look at the ingredients, there's ingredients we don't even understand what we're eating. How does that play out in our body? We don't know long term. So really I'm not saying we have to eat just grains out of the, the jar, but it's the concept of more this ultra processed foods where we don't see the origination of what that food is. I always tell people, I'm like, think about how many steps from farm to fork. If it's an excessive amount of steps, then maybe trying to avoid that, right? Picking something that's a little more closer to the ground and preferably more plant-based. Our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he did not eat meat all the time. So that's why I look at these diets that talk about eat how the caveman ate, eat like how our ancestors ate with lots of meat. They actually did not eat that much meat. They didn't have, even the way the meat was raised, right? What were cows eating at that time? They were eating grass. And then we think now, what is being fed to our livestock? They're eating grains, right? They're eating all sorts of different things that are being put in, antibiotics are being pumped into them, hormones to pump them up so that they're constantly lactating for milk, right? To fatten them up so that we have these big, pieces of meat, right? Even white meat, the chicken breast has expanded over the years, right? I remember visiting over and thinking, oh wait, this actually is the correct size of chicken, right? We're so used to like chicken, huge portions that we forget what animal size is actually supposed to be. So how does this play out in our body, right? The state that these animals are living in is actually very stressful, right? They're not free range roaming unless we're purchasing that, right? They're in close quarters. They're not even physically able to walk that much. And that's a whole session in and of itself, is the way that our food is being raised, right? It's scary, to be quite honest, a lot of the time. So on our end, doing the best that we can, to get organic, right? To get local, right? To get, free range, pasture range, raised, items as much as we potentially can, so just looking beyond the concept of, halal and sabiha, but like, how is my food, the whole concept of tayyib, right? Wholesome, pure foods as much as possible. And trying to get more plants in, right? We don't need to be eating meat, all the time, right? And especially during this month, I know a lot of times people are like, no, I gotta have that big piece of meat, when I break my fast. But maybe trying to avoid that, maybe having something plant-based instead, having that soup, right? Having that nice salad. We'll talk again more on that. Eat less, right? Watching our portions. So again, in our prophetic guidance, we have a lot of guidance on what the Prophet like ate. We have lots of guidance on that, but we also have guidance on how he ate, the manner of which he ate, how he wasn't eating that frequently, right? Even the portions, right? So really doing our best to cut it down, getting a 9-inch plate, because even our plates have expanded over the years, right? So we want to kind of bring it down, try to aim for like ideally a 9-inch plate. And I'll show you a little breakdown a little bit later on how we want to fill that plate. Also, don't drink your calories. A lot of times we have so much calorically dense beverages that could be meals in and of themselves. I've seen some, milkshakes out there that are like 1,000 calories. I'm like, wow. And when we're drinking our calories, we're not feeling that concept of satiation, right? It's easy to drink, a big glass of juice, and then we're like, what else is there? But it's hard to eat that equivalent of oranges, right? Let's suppose we had an 8-ounce cup of orange juice. That's maybe what, 4 or 5 oranges. That's hard to eat, but it's easy to drink. So trying to cut out those drink calories. And, during our month here of Ramadan, I know a lot of times people try to get in that, protein drink or whatever at suhoor time because they're running late. That's fine. But it's ideal if you can actually eat something, right? Get that food consumption is. Also really helpful for weight management is planning our meals. And this is actually a really good opportunity to do so in the month of Ramadan, so that we aren't in the kitchen, right? I know Sheikh Hisham touched upon avoiding the kitchen, abstaining from the kitchen last night, which I thought was awesome. But trying to plan out our meals. Okay, what are we gonna eat? Let's try to keep it simple, right? Doing things, yeah, throw dates at them and run, exactly. But keeping things simple, right? Trying to plan ahead so that we're able to focus more on our spiritual practices. And also along with this, what I would tag team with this is even planning our exercise, actually. Planning when you're going to do that family walk, right? When am I going to do my quick stretching video? Plan that as well. And also what's really helpful, and we don't have to do it during this month, but we do see, for weight management and just health management, is just keeping track of what you're eating and drinking. It really is eye-opening that, oh, I had no idea that's what I was having. Wow, I didn't know that when I ate my kids' leftovers, it actually counts. So all this stuff starts to add up. So obviously in the month of Ramadan, it's easier to keep track during the day, but ask yourself, what am I eating? How am I breaking my fast? All that stuff does add up, and we may not even realize it because we're in that zone of just getting nourishment in. Yeah, don't feed the kid garbage disposal. So this concept of enjoying healthier foods, right? And there's a contemporary author who wrote this: if it came from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. So this, again, this concept of ultra processed foods, right? So try to pick mostly non-processed, very minimally processed food. And honestly, everyone, this is a really good time of year to incorporate these principles, right? Because again, we are trying to limit ourselves. We are trying to restrain ourselves. So it makes it a little bit easier. And what happens is once we start to eat more minimally processed foods, when we do eat that processed food, when we eat that fried food, sometimes it doesn't set at what as well, right? You might start noticing that as you just start eating better, certain things that you used to eat before, you can't get in, right? I'm just going to share with you that I know when I was younger, they would have those McDonald's fish fillet Fridays for like, I forgot at that time what it was, like $1.50 or something like that. And we used to go as a family and have that. Now I can't eat that because just things have just changed. The food isn't set well. So we'll start to notice that as we start to eat better, everything starts to shift. So we won't be craving those type of foods. So ideal is less than 5 ingredients. Do you understand the ingredients when you're reading food labels? Reading food labels is very powerful. I think us as Muslims, we're used to reading food labels because we're looking out for gelatin, right? We're looking out for things we can't eat. It's just ingrained in our natures. But to really take a look at what exactly those ingredients are. If it has more than 6 ingredients, check out the first 3 ingredients. If the first ingredient is sugar, that means that that product is mostly sugar, right? So try to avoid sugar, salt, fat, and enriched flours, which are processed flours, within those first 3 ingredients. Eat like how our grandparents ate, right? Eat like how our great grandparents ate. So think about what our ancestors had, that quality of food. And then tracking what you're eating and how you're feeling, because you might start noticing certain correlation between food and effects on the body. And I really encourage doing this actually during Ramadan, is that when you are breaking your fast, you have this whole day of not eating. How is this food affecting me? Am I getting lethargic? Am I able to stand for prayer long? If we're eating a greasy, sugary meal and we're in that food coma, we're not. And this is a whole separate concept. And as I mentioned earlier, I've done different talks for the Rahma Foundation. They actually are listed online on YouTube. I did a whole talk on gut health that I would refer those that are more interested on this subject. But we have trillions of microbes in our GI tract, especially in our large intestine, that will break down undigested food. They help make vitamins and minerals, make foods and nutrients more bioavailable for our bodies. They actually are very key for our immune health. They affect our mood and skin health. There's so much that they are involved in. So I think many people have heard of probiotics and prebiotics. And these are foods, the probiotics actually are foods that have various of these organisms in them that provide a health benefit to our body. So this is kind of like the bacteria and the microbes themselves. So these are things like yogurt, fermented foods, kimchi, tempeh, miso. These are like fermented cabbage and soy, kefir, which is a really great drink, like a yogurty drink. You can get honestly everywhere now. This is a nice drink to actually have at iftar time, right? When you're breaking your fast, have that date getting in some nice kefir with all these different healthy microbes to help your digestive health. Kombucha, even certain soft fermented cheeses. But I in particular really like the yogurt and the kefir, having that during this month of Ramadan, right? At suhoor time, maybe having some good Greek yogurt. There's even like Icelandic yogurt, even good old homemade yogurt that I know many cultures have that with some fruit, have that with some nuts, right? Starting our day off like that with these good microbes, a good amount of protein for the rest of the day. And then also these organisms, they need food themselves. And so the best food for them is fiber-rich foods, which we get from fruits and vegetables and beans, lentils, whole grains, which are also important to have throughout, the days as well. Now, this is a very important concept. I think a lot of times we forget, is that it takes 20 minutes for our stomach to send the message to our brain that we've had enough to eat. So when we eat, right, our stomach stretches out, the food starts to move into the small intestine, and we actually have different hormones, like feeling full hormones that will get released as our stomach is stretching out. And I think we feel this concept of stomach stretching out a lot of times in Ramadan, right? Because after the month is over, how many of you forget to eat, right? Because our stomach has shrunken down. We're like, oh yeah, wait, Ramadan is over. I can eat during the day, right? We forget because our stomach has stretched down and we've gotten into that habit. But we do feel this concept a lot. And during the month of Ramadan, our stomach is literally shrinking, right? Because we're not having that consumption of food. But it's very easy to stretch out too. So that's unfortunately the opposite effect. But giving ourselves that 20 minutes, slowing it down, right? So this is a good concept to incorporate at iftar instead of just like, here I have my plate full of food, breaking fast with the date, right? With the water, maybe having the kefir or the yogurt drink or whatever. I know there's certain cultures that have certain drinks that just go, and that's fine. Taking that break, praying, right? That automatically is at 20 minutes right there. It just beautiful as just incorporated in. And then go and have your food. And you'll find that you'll eat less, right? And trying to have better foods. So just slow it down, right? This concept of just being mindful, right? I know Sheikh Hisham mentioned that a lot of times we say Bismillah, we just, right, get into the food. But what if we were to say that with each bite, right? It was just such a powerful concept last night. On a scale of 1 to 10, and this is out of Ramadan, but we don't ever want to wait to the point of where we're starving too much, where you're literally going to pass out. That's waiting too long. And usually people, if they wait that long, they end up eating excessive. So start to eat when we're kind of starting to feel a little bit hungry, and we stop eating at, I would say, level 7. Level 7, we can get a couple more bites in, but we're going to pull back. Because after 20 minutes, we're going to have that feeling of fullness. We never want to get to the point of level 10 where you're just like stuffed, where you're like, oh my goodness, I'm just going to feel sick. That's too much. And that's not even something that's suggested anyways in our tradition. So let's talk about, an eating plan that we can have in place. And again, this is a great time of year to start to incorporate these concepts. But obviously during Ramadan, we're fasting every day. But when Ramadan is over, right, the concept of continuing the fast, the sunnah of twice a week, right, our Mondays and Thursdays, it's actually really powerful to be able to do that, right? The 3 days, of the full moon, right, in mid-month, whatever it is that you're able to do, but making fasting a part of your habit. But how are we fasting, everyone? That's the thing that we have to be aware of, right? Yeah, we're like, yeah, we'll fast. But what are we eating? How are we breaking our fast? Right? Limit those fried goodies. I know, my friends, there are certain foods that we just need to have. I have family members that are like that. Like, how is that not on the table? But maybe limiting that, okay, once a week when I go to that iftar gathering, right? Make it a social, type of an event, right? Where you're having just very small amounts. Listen to your body. How are you feeling when you're having those fried foods? Is it tying you down, wearing you down? And then also, what are we having at suhoor time? I know a lot of times there's different practices that people do where they'll just skip suhoor. I'll just eat a big meal at 1 a.m. and then I'm just not going to eat. Oh, I'm seeing what's in the chat box. Yeah, go for it. Right. But keep those items like, once in a while type things. But having a good solid suhoor. And I love how suhoor actually is the sunnah, to have something to at least drink, eat something in our system. So make that a point to do that. And this when we are out of Ramadan, also the concept is eating less, spacing our meals, right? Trying to cut the meal earlier on in the day. Maybe you decide, again, this is out of Ramadan, obviously, but like at 7 p.m., I'm just going to stop eating at 7 p.m. and I'm not going to eat for another 12 hours. I'm not going to eat until 7 a.m., right? 8, 9. You can extend it out 16 hours. I'm more of a fan of a 12 to 14 hour gap during the day. Except diabetics, please speak with your Muslim practitioner. And I spelled practitioner wrong, excuse me, I just saw that. But talk with your Muslim practitioner regarding fasting, as they're more familiar, with what the practices are. I know a lot of times I, have patients that are Muslim, they'll go to non-Muslim physicians, and like, no, you can't fast at all, but they're able to. There's ways to do it. So again, check with a Muslim practitioner. But for this concept of intermittent fasting, of time restricted eating, for some people it may not be recommended. So this is actually a really good practice to try to incorporate on a regular basis. And this is something that we do see good effects in terms of weight management and just feeling better. If we're not fasting, try to space out meals and snacks, listen to our body. Snacks really are not a must. They really are not. Our ancestors were not like, hey, let's go have a snack. They didn't have snacks available, number one, right? But we now have this luxury, right, of just snacking. And this whole concept of, oh, I should be eating every 2 hours, that's a concept that's just very foreign to our tradition, right? We're not, I've read this before in the tradition of like cattle, where we just pull up the trough and eating all the time. No. And there's so many different stories of how, even amongst our Sahaba, like eating 2 meals was a luxury, right? So just trying to tone it down, right? Listening to our bodies, being more mindful when we're eating, listening to our hunger cues, right? And then also trying to have more of the substantial meals actually earlier on in the day, because we are seeing this in the research that we have different hormones that are circulating during the day than at night. So we process foods differently. So again, there's just so much hikmah in this, that just eating those bigger meals earlier on in the day, but still these are not huge meals, smaller meals, but more substantial. And that last meal should be more of the lighter meal, and it should be we should end the eating more earlier on at night. Try to balance the meals. I'm going to be talking really briefly about the plate method. And we need all food groups, my friends. We need carbohydrates, we need proteins, we need fats. Unfortunately, so many of these groups have been villainized, and especially carbohydrates have gotten a really bad rap, where people feel, oh, no, I can't eat carbs, it's going to make me fat. And that's not the situation. We'll talk more about that. And we want to have more plant-based as much as possible. So I'm going to now really quickly talk about the macronutrients. So we need these foods in balance, in moderation. They are very important. And I want us to be thinking about kind of the makeup of our foods during Ramadan, to be incorporating these different food groups. So carbohydrates, they are not bad. Please, everyone, repeat after me. Carbs are not bad. If you think about our ancestors, this is actually the bulk of what they ate. They ate grains, right? They ate rice, they eat beans, potatoes, right? Meat was not a huge staple. It was like a side, it was a luxury, right? It was a flavoring. It was not the mainstay of the meal as it's become now, right? And we talked earlier about even the quality of the meats and how that has changed over the years. It's different. Our food has become different, unfortunately. Now, what carbohydrates are, this is actually our body's main source of energy, and they turn into glucose. And yes, they turn into sugar, but sugar, I don't want us to think of like, oh, it's turning into table sugar in my blood. It's not, it's a molecule. It breaks down into glucose. And this is very important for our brain cells, for our muscle cells, our nerve cells, our blood cells. There are certain cells that just prefer this glucose. And this is a quick source of energy. And we feel that when we break the fast, right? When we're eating that date. And it's so beautiful how that is the sunnah, because the date is not only full of this beneficial glucose, but there's fibers in there, there's magnesium, there's all these other vitamins and minerals there that are very important. So it's like this energy boost, bam, right then, that we get and we need, right? And combining that maybe with some nuts, some healthy fats, especially for those that have, blood sugars that are fluctuating, could be very helpful to kind of regulate that. But it's giving us that energy right there and then in quality form. So I just love how that's just incorporated into our tradition. Carbohydrates, these again are very high in minerals, vitamins, and fiber, right? But the problem is, everyone, that we have to tweak how much we eat and what kind, right? What I have shown here on the slide, this is a whole grain. It has all the layers intact, the bran, the germ. These are nutrient dense, right? But unfortunately, what happens with the processing of grains is they will remove the bran, they'll remove the germ, and then we're just left with that inner, carbohydrate rich endosperm layer, which is fine, but we're missing those nutrients in the bran and the germ. And that also affects how quickly our body processes the food. So our ancestors, they were actually eating whole grains, right? They were not having this processed form that we are seeing. So these are the preferred carbohydrates. These are the carbs I don't want us to be scared of. I want us actually to be incorporating these on a regular basis. And especially at sahur time, please make sure that you are getting at least one of these. All right. So our preferred carbohydrates are beans and lentils. These are rich also in protein. And I know there's a lot of cultures that have that as like a dish, right, for breakfast. So that's amazing to get in. Starchy vegetables are okay as well, peas, corn, potatoes. But ideally, if you're doing potatoes, more like the sweet potato would be better. Foods made from ancient grains, whole grains. So these are like the old school grains that we now are seeing really make a comeback. So quinoa, amaranth, barley, and I want to highlight barley. Barley is actually, interestingly enough, everyone, an appetite suppressant. It makes us feel full. Does anyone know the prophetic dish that incorporates barley? Mahuba isn't on this list. Yes, that's on the that's on the extra credit list. Does anyone know that prophetic dish that actually is made of barley? I'll give a hint. It starts with a T. No, it's thelbina. How many of you have heard of thelbina? There's actually a really good YouTube video showing how to make that. Is even one with one of the sheikhs that's actually making it. But it's it's a barley based dish, and I just found that to be so beautiful that that's a prophetic food, and that is actually an appetite suppressant. So maybe incorporating some barley, bulgur, millet, teff, all these ancient grains, brown rice, wild rice, oatmeal, maybe, starting your suhoor off with some, overnight oats, corn tortillas, or whatever, breads, homemade breads that you make. If you notice in the ancient grains list, there is no wheat in that category because wheat has really changed over the years, unfortunately. So I wouldn't really consider that an ancient grain anymore. I'm not knocking wheat, but if you're going to have wheat, make sure it's like whole wheat, whole grain. And this is, again, not for everyone. Some people have legit sensitivities to gluten, which is a protein found in wheat, rye, and barley. So again, going back to listening to your body and what health conditions that you have. But if you're able to tolerate grains, trying to take in some grains, especially those grains that are coming from, whatever, our home region is, we tend to tolerate a little bit better. Fruit is fine as well, but in its whole form, not in the juice form. Really try to avoid the juice because juice is very condensed amount of sugars, right? So we want to have fruit in its whole form. We want to also consider milk and yogurt are considered carbs as well. But if we're having milk, it's okay to have like the non-dairy milks as well. Maybe you don't tolerate regular cow's milk, so you have your almond milk, whatever milk, those are fine as well. So getting at least one of these things in. The carbs to limit, of course, we all know what those are. I don't need to list them, but I think we all know. But why should we limit these carbs? I know Dr. Lemis is going to be actually talking about the effects of sugar on our body later on. So I'll leave that to her amazing presentation that's coming up. And just to really quickly, just to kind of highlight the amounts for the American Heart Association, we're really trying to limit the daily amounts of added sugars, right? So for women, maximum of 6.5 teaspoons. For men, a maximum of 9.5 teaspoons. I'm not going to highlight how much sugar is in some of our desserts, but it's definitely more than these amounts. Also, everyone, as we're thinking about our sahur meals and how to break the fast, make sure we have good quality protein, right? Aiming for about 15 to 20 grams per meal. ideally picking more of the plant-based protein. Beans, lentils, soy. Right?
Can you catch me? Can you catch me?
I think if people can, I'm sorry, someone can just mute. I love having children here as well. But thank you. All right. I'm just gonna, in the interest of time, I can be talking about this stuff for more and more time, but in the interest of time, just gonna kind of speed things along here. So making sure we have a good source of protein with our meal. Fats are also very important. And Sheikh Hisham was talking about that last night, right? Like eating oil, right? Eating good quality olive oil. And I love that, right? Having small amount of that with our food. And actually olive oil, avocado oil, these are the oils that are more recommended rather than some of the other liquid oils. But especially olive oil, we actually find almost like an antiseptic, like an aspirin-like quality to it. So it's amazing to see, you know, the research on olive oil, but we've already known in our tradition the benefits of it, as outlined by our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him. Oops, there we go. A list of some really quick foods to try to aim for regularly. So these are things to kind of think about, you know, incorporating during Ramadan. A fistful of dark green veggies. So just a fistful of spinach, kale, even lettuce would be okay. Not iceberg, but even lettuce would be okay. There's something called power greens you can get at the store. So incorporating that, maybe you have your morning smoothie with that. Maybe you break your fast and later on have a really nice salad. But incorporating that, having the ancient grains, which I mentioned, getting in one serving, which is about half a cup cooked of legumes, which are beans or lentils daily, or at least 3 times per week. Berries, having them daily or at least 3 times a week. We see really good research on berries and immune health and reducing blood pressure amongst all the different antioxidants and phytochemicals that they have. Flaxseed, this is another thing that's also very filling, and it provides us with good, healthy omega-3 fats. You can sprinkle that in your morning oatmeal on your thalbina, right? Turmeric, that is a spice that many of us have, right? It's incorporated into our cultures. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory spice. So sprinkling that around in our foods. Having a handful of nuts, and I love this because this is a good way to break our fast. We have our dates and we have a little bit of nuts, almonds, walnuts, right? For those that have thyroid, or even though they're concerned about thyroid, a Brazil nut has the amount of selenium, which is a mineral that we need for the day to help support thyroid health. So something like that. So breaking our fast that way, so we're getting some healthy fats in, so our blood sugars won't shoot up too much, but we're also getting these beneficial qualities. And some nice green tea. A lot of really good research has come out on the benefits of green tea in terms of mood, immunity, and nutrient value. All right, I'm just gonna actually skip through some of this. So this is kind of a healthy plate. This is what I would like us to be thinking about during this month. Yes, Dr. Limi's put into the chat about the Brazil nuts. So this is our healthy plate that we want to aim for as much as we can. And this is a great time of month to try to incorporate this concept. We want to have half of our plate with these non-starchy vegetables. You can have some fruits in there, but more aim on the vegetables, having some sort of a whole grain or the starchy vegetable or the beans or lentils in the category right here, and then 1/4 of our plate, and then the other quarter is our healthy protein, right? Which can also include the beans and lentils there as well. So here's a little more of a breakdown of the plate. This is a nice template that you can use for breakfast, for sahur. You can use this even for snacks as well, but we want to make sure that we're always having some sort of a fiber-rich carbohydrate and combining it with either a lean protein and or a healthy fat. It should actually say plus healthy fat here, I apologize, as well. So this is not a comprehensive list by any means, but this is just some common fiber-rich carbs that we see pop up at breakfast time. So fresh fruit, the old-fashioned steel-cut oats, the barley, the thalbina I was mentioning earlier. Sometimes you might just be tired. I know as the month evolves, we're just tired of waking up and eating, and we just want to turn to cereals, which is fine, but look for ones that are less than 5 grams of sugar. Good luck with that. It's very rare. that's whole grain or whole wheat or sprouted grain would be more ideal. Toasts, they have sprouted grain tortillas and waffles, things like that. Try to avoid the enriched flours at that time. The corn tortillas, the homemade breads we may be having, beans, which is also considered protein. So combine one of those things or two with either a healthy fat or the proteins. This is a good way of balancing it out. So we see here this picture of some sprouted grain bread. We got some natural peanut butter. Natural means when you read the ingredients, it's only peanuts and maybe salt, or almonds and maybe salt, or no salt, nothing else. A lot of these peanut butters and almond butters have a lot of other stuff added to it. So you want the natural kind. There's some bananas there, and then they have sprinkled some hemp seeds. That's really nice. You can do avocado toast. Again, your own cultural foods are totally fine, right? If you're running out of time and just can't do it, do a protein shake, go for it, right? But trying to make sure we're having a nice combination and thinking ahead. I know for myself personally, with our family, we try to alternate because I'm like, it's tiring eating the same thing over and over. So maybe one week we'll eat this, one week we'll eat this. So planning things like that ahead of time could be helpful. I'm going to skip this part about hunger because we know how hunger feels during this month. But just being aware of our bodies, right? I just, again, really powerful from last night about the sunnah of hunger. So in summary, what we find really to be helpful in just overall optimal wellness, weight management, is principles that really we're so blessed that they're already incorporated in our deen. And if we just turn back to what our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, told us, we can be successful. So having a positive mindset, it's sunnah to be positive and optimistic. So being positive about our health. I can do this. It's hard, but I can do this. Cutting out those sugary beverages, including the 100% juice, that's unnecessary calories a lot of time. Reduce dessert. Be a calorie snob. Yes, I actually had a patient once who made me a shirt. Be a calorie snob. Let's be selective about those calories that we're putting into our body, right? If you're breaking your fast, instead of just having like a whatever dish that you don't like, have something that you really enjoy. If you're going to be having chocolate, have the best chocolate, right? But being mindful of that when you're eating it, right? Really being grateful, right? Remembering our blessings that we have. Reduce to eliminate snacky foods, chips, crackers. Take them out of the pantry, my friends. Honestly, if it's not in front of us, hopefully it won't be calling us, right? So just take the enemy out of the house. Reduce to eliminate the enriched grains. These are processed grains. I know a lot of them are incorporated into our traditions. I know we know like white rice in our Pakistani culture, white rice and lentils. That's like the comfort food, right? But trying to reduce the amount of times that you're having it, thinking of it as a treat, right? Instead, trying to pick the whole grain versions instead. Reduce to eliminate the processed foods, the ultra processed, the less ingredients, the better, the more wholesome, the more pure, the better. Eat more plant-based, be more of a flexitarian. Flexitarian are people who mostly eat plants. Like they will have meat, but they're mostly are plant-based, or follow the Mediterranean lifestyle. Mediterranean lifestyle doesn't mean you're eating pita bread and hummus and falafel. I'm not saying it like that. It means more like the concept of just more plants. Intermittent fasting. So making maybe a promise to yourself that after the month is over, you're going to continue with fasting. Once a week, twice a week, right? Don't eat late night. I know I'm not saying right now in Ramadan. I know in Ramadan it's going to happen. I know, giving disclaimer this is for after Ramadan. Have those larger meals earlier on in the day. Potentially cut out dairy and gluten and see how you feel, right? There are certain foods that just don't sit well with some people. Listen to your hunger cues, watch those portion sizes, make sure you're getting in some physical activity, manage your stress and sleep, social connection. Gratitude is such a powerful emotion. And then pray, ibadah, but being in it, right? Have that khushu in there as we're doing it. Because we see so much research coming out on meditation. And whenever I read the meditation research, I'm like, we're so lucky as Muslims. We have this already within our tradition. So with that said, everyone, this was just a quick overview. There's so much to talk about. I could go on and on and on, but we're really blessed to have Dr. Lamis, Dr. Mazen later on to provide us with even more in-depth information. And inshallah, I pray that this remainder of this retreat is blessed. We take this information and it's transformative to us. And I think I have a 3 minutes, I believe. So if anyone has any questions, comments, I would love to hear from you. I am open to sharing my email, and so if you have questions, you are welcome to contact me. I love hearing from our community. I can put my email in the chat box actually, and if anyone has any questions, Sister Maha, if you have anything you want to add, would love to hear. Just typing in my information. So if anyone wants to email me, here you go.
Jazakallah khair. That was amazing. You know, I'm putting in jokes about like mahshi and all
I
that.
love it. I love it.
But like real talk, these are this is life-changing advice. And subhanAllah, like I have a daughter who's epileptic. And so we had turned the house keto because
yes.
it impacts like it actually she was refusing treatment and she didn't want any meds, and keto, when you go into ketosis, it decreases the risk of seizures, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so we flipped the whole house upside down and we like went into the cupboards, threw everything out that had any ingredients that we couldn't read, you know, or understand the words or pronounce. And so we went through this whole it was like we converted, right? The whole house.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I thought I was doing it for her, and then all of a sudden I realized, like a few months into it, like all the swelling and the extra fluid in my body just disappeared, and my energy went up, and obviously within reason. So even with ketosis, I learned, like I see people like taking in like fat, basically like eating fat, and they don't realize like that's not really what you have to do. It's about percentages and like increasing your vegetables, and it you have to like figure out how it works for your body. But once but it was completely life-changing. It allows you to sleep. When you find what works for you, and a lot of these things that you mentioned we implemented, eventually she bailed on me and she's like, I want cookies and rice, and I ended up going on with it. But it changes how you sleep, it changes your concentration, it changes how your body moves, the pressure on your joints, it changed everything. And it
really does.
And I was a gym rat for many, many, many years, like working out. And I never got the same feeling as I did changing my diet. So your advice is golden. I hope everyone was paying attention, because it was, these are some of the things that really, you know, did something different for my house and for my kids. Like now, when you introduce vegetables to them, they start to crave it, ironically. It's like,
exactly.
And
you know, and Sister Matt, you make such a good point about how it can be so transformative for the entire family if everyone's doing it together. And you know, the thing is, you know, go back everyone to your practitioner to see what works for you. Everyone's different, you know. So for your daughter, due to her seizures, the keto actually is very important, you know. So that's fantastic. You were able to do that. For other people, it may not work, you know. So you have to see. Everyone has to kind of see, based on their health status, again, what works best for them, and everyone's different. So what works for you may not work for others, but keep coming back to our, you know, our prophetic principles and incorporating them is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And I see some questions pop up in the chat. Advice for someone who is disabled, veteran, and cannot eat solid food. I think Sister Muni, I would recommend, you know, working with a dietitian to get, you know, different liquid foods. There's different supplements that can be provided, you know, or soft foods. So I would have to kind of learn a little bit more about what they're able to tolerate. But definitely working with a dietitian or a naturopathic doctor to see what could be incorporated based on what, you know, they're able to tolerate, and inshallah get them that optimal nutrition that they need. A lot of these foods that have anti-inflammatory properties, yes, help with joint pain, and I will recommend them to my Muslim patients assist exactly. And actually, I had a slide. I skipped through it, but there was a slide on inflammation, because that's a whole other, huge area as well that many of us are actually suffering with, because of the foods that we're eating can be very inflammatory, high amounts of sugar, which I know Dr. Muniz will be talking about, certain red meats, even processed foods, stress. So we want to kind of switch more to an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, which honestly, the principles that are on the screen can really help with. But yeah, that's a whole separate subject. Any other questions?
If anyone wants to raise their hand and turn on their mic, you can do that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The other thing that we do here, my youngest, she loves like reading the Sirah and learning what the Prophet ﷺ used to like to eat. And we would implement that in our fast. So like in the mornings, we tend to get dates and like heat them and then make them these little circles with nuts and then put cucumbers next to it. Yeah. And believe it or not, that carries them all day. It's really amazing. It's really amazing. So
it is, mashallah.
Prophetic foods, learning prophetic foods.
Yeah, I can't wait to learn more about that. And during this weekend, I know Sheikh Hisham has a lot of great information that we're going to be taking in.
Absolutely. Any more questions? I love your name, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Love it. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I always want
to. It's so funny. I actually never liked my name until I got older and I learned what it meant, and then it was transformative. Then I'm like, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, I think we got another comment here.
Okay, yeah. So Sister Muni, just message me, inshallah. I can kind of maybe learn more about what you're dealing with and go from there. But if you again have a local dietitian or practitioner, I would definitely also recommend. Oh, brother, excuse me. So yes, if you want to email me, we can talk offline and I can learn a little bit more about what you're dealing with, inshallah.
Yeah, may Allah make it easy.
Yeah, I mean,
and give shifa. All right, so I think this concludes our session 1. You have our beautiful sister Roohe's email address. I saw you put it in the comments here.
Yes.
It's roohea@gmail.com. That's very easy to remember. And we will see everybody back here. It's time for Dhuhr and lunch, at least here on the East Coast. But we'll see everybody back here at 2 o'clock, inshallah, for session 2 with Haj Hisham. And we really want to thank you. Like, you really dropped so many gems for us to start thinking about how to prepare for Ramadan. So we appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
All right. So we'll see everybody at 2 o'clock. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.